Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio. Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
The show is brought to you by our generous patrons at patreon.com/Fallout Lorecast.
Robots Radio presents the Fallout Lorecast.
Welcome to the Fallout Lorecast, a place for the Fallout community to come together to explore the boundaries of our knowledge about the world of Fallout. All right, Vault Dwellers, Wastelanders, welcome back to the Fallout Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and this is a very special episode because I'm not alone today. I've been doing a lot of these solo episodes, and last week I was talking about the Enclave and the crazy AI that was controlling them during the events of Fallout 3, and I thought to myself, you know what? I need to get a little bit deeper into the Enclave, and was thinking through some of the different events in some of the games, and it took me back to the events of Fallout 76, and then I thought about my good buddy here, Lawrance, from the MODUS files, one of the shows on the Robots Radio Rocket Club, who's absolutely killing it. He is one of the most prolific writers that I know. He's been on the show before. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to call him and see if he wants to come on the show and talk a little bit more in detail about what's actually going on behind the surface of Fallout 76, the events leading up to Fallout 76 when you come out of the vault, and all the nitty gritty of the Enclave in Appalachia. And sure enough, he's like, yeah, man, I can do it. Why not? Let's do this thing. And so here he is, Lawrence from the MODUS files. How's it going, buddy?
It's going really well. I'm really happy to be here tonight. This is going to be cool. It's obviously a part of the lore that I love, but I love it because it's just so different. I like that. I mean, not that I like evil factions or whatever, but I think that there's just a lot there that people can kind of get their heads around. And there is, like you said, there's a lot more about them in 76 than I think a lot of players have actually figured out. So,
yeah, it's the kind of thing where you really do have to make sure that you read the terminals, you talk to the right people, and then you even kind of read between the lines in order to get the full story. And I know that in doing research for your podcast called the MODUS Files, like if you've played through the storyline, you know who MODUS is. You do some quests for the crazy, creepy robot thing and, well, AI thing. And you get a little bit of a sense of it. Even if you aren't the kind of person who goes and reads everything, at least you run into the character. And so when you see a podcast up there and you're searching for Fallout podcasts and you see the MODUS Files, it rings a bell. You at least know, okay, this has to do with the Enclave. This has to do with that part of the storyline of Fallout 76. And I know that you have done a thorough job in digging into the lore in order to build your storylines and really flesh out the stories for your show. So what I wanted to do is have a discussion with you where we can take everybody through, and I've talked a little bit about this on the show before, going way back on some of the episodes about Thomas Eckert and the events leading up to some of the terrible atrocities that kind of doomed all of the people in the wasteland before the vaults opened, and basically everybody died because they couldn't get along, they couldn't work together. But I want to just kind of recap from the Enclave's perspective, what was going on, what led to failure, and where things kind of go from there. Because I know for a fact, talking with you, that there's other stuff going on that a lot of people don't know about. So maybe let's just start with Thomas Eckert, right? He was the Secretary of Agriculture and basically became the assumed leader at the White Springs bunker for what was left of the United States at the time after the bombs dropped.
Well, it's an interesting story because and actually, I think maybe to start, we can take even maybe a half step back and, and so right before the war, the Enclave, which was this shadow government that existed kind of behind the scenes in the U.S. government, made up of some members of the Joint Chiefs and some members of the U.S. government and also members of industry, because you saw people from West Tech there.
Yeah.
Valtech was definitely involved.
Yeah.
And so right before the war, right before the bombs dropped, the president and his crew all vacated to the Poseidon oil rig out, off of California in the Pacific Ocean.
Right. Fallout 2 reference.
Yeah, Fallout 2 reference. Yep. And there were other Enclave facilities across the country. Chicago gets mentioned a lot. Mm-hmm. There was a couple in Colorado. I actually personally believe that there was one at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is actually right across the Ohio River from Appalachia. But so there were all of these areas. Now, the White Spring Bunker was actually a personal project of Thomas Eckert. He actually pushed through the funding that built the White Spring Bunker. And so when the bombs dropped, there were a lot of people that go to White Spring, the Enclave, obviously. So Eckert was there and also the Secretary of Treasury, who was actually technically in the line of succession above Eckert. And as soon as they got there, people that had the special card that said they were part of the Enclave were let in. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, which was actually because it was known as the Congressional Bunker, you actually had the majority of Congress people from Washington, D.C. going to that bunker. They were immediately segregated and shot. So all of those people were killed, like right off the bat.
Right. So immediately, the Enclave's great. They're good people, right? Like they're the good guys, right?
You're right. Now, actually, at that point, you have another character that actually enters the story, which we read about quite a bit, and we hear actually holotapes, and we technically find his body, which was Agent Gray. Actually, Jefferson Gray was his name. And so he gets to the bunker as well because he was actually doing some dirty work in Appalachia. And he ultimately becomes Eckert's right-hand man. But at the beginning, you had kind of this initial formation of the Enclave in Appalachia. They were getting themselves organized. And at that point, Eckert started to articulate his desire to continue the war with China. In his mind, they weren't finished. And also at the same time, they figured out that they had no contact with any of the other Enclave facilities. Right.
They were cut off, and it was his big thing is he wanted to retaliate.
He did. Yeah. He did. And that's a big mystery, which hasn't been answered yet, which is why that bunker was cut off from the rest of the Enclave. I mean, I have some ideas about, Eckert could have done it. MODUS might have done it, because he maybe had his own plans, or potentially maybe it was even the Enclave outside of Appalachia that cut them off because maybe they felt that they weren't necessary.
Or they were too dangerous.
Because they already knew, if you read the logs, there was communication between MODUS and Zax, actually, which became President Eden, where even MODUS was beginning to notice that that Zax was not following his directives.
Right. And we had a squabble between AIs.
Yeah. Like, why are you reading these books about presidents? He's like, Zax is like, what? You don't find this interesting? And MODUS is like, no, because it's not our job. Which is of course very interesting. And I think goes to maybe a misconception that people kind of have about MODUS, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
A little bit later. But so the way Eckert actually got put in charge is that the Secretary of Treasury dies. I believe he has radiation poisoning. So he ends up passing away. So that leaves Eckert in charge. And Eckert starts articulating the fact that he wants to nuke China. They've got these silos in Appalachia. The war's not over yet. We have to eliminate communism. And there were actually a good portion of people in the bunker who were like, dude, did you look outside? The war is over. We need to be concentrating on rebuilding. And Eckert was like, well, okay. All right. Well, let's put it up for a vote. anybody that wants to be on my side, come over here. Everybody that wants to be on the other side, go over there. And as soon as they go over there, Eckhart's like, okay, MODUS. And then the door's shut. He gasses everybody.
Oh, geez.
So Eckhart was pretty ruthless right from the beginning. Now, when you read the logs, at this point, there are 48 people left in that bunker. So, when people kind of think of the scale of the Enclave, sometimes they think, oh, well, they must have had like thousands of people there. It's like, no, there were like 48 people to begin with. Now that's in the bunker. I do think that there were kind of other people in Appalachia because there were other facilities. There were government facilities that I think were staffed that they had control of. But
sure. And military, like if they're the ones who are in charge of the government, then anybody who's actually still functioning as military would still be taking orders from them.
Yeah. And I don't think it was all of them. Like there's actually you find some holotapes or some terminal entries in the Monongah nuclear power plant where there was a military unit that was actually assigned there. They ultimately were wiped out by raiders, but at the same time, there were other units, I think, inside. So I don't necessarily I look at that 48 number and I say, wow, that's a small number of people, but I think you can fudge the numbers as well. I think there were probably more people in and around Appalachia that ultimately they brought on board.
It's this kind of gray zone where if at that point, I have to ask the question of who knows that they're Enclave and who who doesn't know they're Enclave, but are working for the U.S. government that has been now co-opted by the Enclave. You get what I'm saying? Like, so for example, like a remote group of military members who are simply taking orders from this group who is acting as the U.S. government that's co-opted by the Enclave don't know that they're acting as Enclave members at this point. They're simply following orders as the U.S. military.
Absolutely. And I think that I think really, if you look at that core, I think maybe a couple of dozen really diehards. And that's, again, one of the reasons why Eckhart kind of got rid of anybody that didn't really follow along with him. But it also meant that the people who were left were really the diehards, which meant that when he started giving the orders that he gave, which were, okay, we need to gain access to these silos. Yeah, they were like, sure, we're absolutely on board. We're going to do that.
Yeah. Or we know we're going to die. So yes, yes. Okay. Yes.
I think people can get hyper fixated on him going after the silos, which is, again, kind of where Agent Gray comes back into the picture, because Gray was the one that started suggesting to Eckhart that, hey, if we're going to get access to these silos, we still need to get the DEFCON level up, because, or whatever computers are controlling the silos are looking outside and are like, well, okay, the war's over, so it's like DEFCON 5. No, we need to raise it. So Gray was actually the one that started talking to Eckhart about what can we do, and specifically false flag operations, to get this. And Gray was the one that actually found the Chinese secret base underneath Mama Dulce's, because they were searching for a way to get into the silos. He eliminated the few remaining Chinese that were there, and all of a sudden now they can start constructing liberators. So that was actually their first thing that they did, is that they started releasing liberators into Appalachia.
Right, which is part of why you find them in the game.
Right. All over the place. Yeah. So they were making those, and that was definitely, that was pretty bad. But, liberators, except for the level 50 ones that we find, are really annoying.
Right. Yeah. But the ones you find right out of the vault, they're like little baby things, and they pop up and you break them and they crap, they crash down. That's it. Yeah.
So as this started, all of a sudden now you get a new influx of people that show up at the bunker. And that's where Colonel Santiago comes into the picture. And she and her troops, which were actually stationed around Washington, D.C., I like to think they were probably at Fort Independence, so kind of a reference to Fallout 3, far enough outside of Washington, D.C. that it wouldn't have been directly affected by the bombs, but it was a major military installation. But again, that's kind of my own personal headcanon. So she and her men, you never know exactly how many she has, but if it's a colonel, I imagine she probably had a brigade. So imagine that you're actually bringing, let's just say several hundred people into the bunker. So they show up and they're like, hey, we're here. We heard you guys are the government. We respect the chain of command. we're here.
Yeah, as any good soldier would, especially during a time of crisis.
Right. So Eckhart's actually he's like falling all over. He's like, hey, this is great. It's actually in Gray that's like, hey, this is kind of weird. You walked all the way here from Washington, D.C. This is, and you didn't lose, and of course, Santiago's telling him, well, we didn't lose anybody. And Gray's like, hey, okay, this doesn't make any sense. There's some discussion that actually goes back and forth until finally Gray backs off and says, okay, yeah, you know what? This does make sense. I respect you. And all of a sudden now Eckhart not only has, he actually has a military force at his command. And this is where we start to see a ramp up of just overall Enclave activities across Appalachia. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the silos. This is actually where we start to see them doing the research into the mutation serums.
Right.
We don't know exactly where I think the genesis of that research came from. I think there was already some pre-war kind of research that was going on into mutagenic compounds, because if we look at who's in Appalachia, you've got West Tech that's researching FEV. Then you have Arctos Pharma. Yeah. And of course, once we get Project Paradise, we find out that there was actually a lot more going on underside below Arctos Pharma than was generally known. And that was actually into mutagenic compounds where you get the sheep squatch. And that's where the sheep squatch came from. So there's a connection between the Enclave and Arctos Pharma. All of a sudden now you've got this research into these mutagenic compounds inside the Enclave base. And they're experimenting actually on Santiago's troops because that's who they had, plus people that they kidnapped from the outside. Right. Because, they're really nice people there in the bunker.
Well, it's a Mariposa, version 2.
Yeah.
It's a callback.
Yes, it is. And in a way, it's actually kind of what Mariposa would have turned into if the bombs hadn't dropped, because that's certainly the direction in which they would have gone. So you have that going on. The Liberators show up. They don't do it. So the next step is, well, what else do we have? Well, they're aware of West Tech. So they go into West Tech and they release all of the super mutants. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, this is great. This is going to be bad.
This is going to be bad for everybody.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yep. So you get super mutants. And of course, as you're reading the logs of the other factions, this is where you start hearing about Huntersville. And then ultimately you had the Responders and the Brotherhood of Steel got together and actually fought a major battle in Huntersville against the super mutants, mm-hmm. Pushing them back to West Tech, though they didn't know exactly where they were coming from. But again, you start seeing the DEFCON level slowly creep up, but it's not to Eckhart's satisfaction. He wants more.
Right. So it's just not dangerous enough. We're just not killing enough people yet.
So they're really reaching into their bag of tricks at this point, and they are, actually pushing out. They're doing a lot of research on not only the super mutants and Liberators, but this is actually where a couple of other things come into the picture that we don't find out about until later. But like Site G, for instance. So if you follow the Brotherhood quest line, at least the original one, all of a sudden you end up underneath one of the communications arrays and you find out that there's an Enclave base under there, mm-hmm. Site G, that's actually run by SOTUS. And I think SOTUS is a unbelievably funny character.
Right.
Because the moment you start talking to her, she sounds like Modus's like really bitchy ex-girlfriend.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So SOTUS doesn't get talked about enough. Everyone talks about MODUS, right? Because super creepy. MODUS is a main focus because of the connection to the Enclave and all of that. But SOTUS is totally worth having a conversation about. MODUS means, the M is multi, right? SOTUS means singular, I believe, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So in the entire, what's the word for? It's SODUS, Singular Operation, Direction, and Utility System.
Yes. As
opposed to multi-operation, direction, and utility system. So, sorry, go ahead.
No. So, so if you think about it, if there's a Site G, that means that there's a Site A, B, C, D, E, F, and potentially other ones. So, the research that they were doing in there was on the creatures, the new creatures in Appalachia. So we find a Mothman in there. We find a Deathclaw. We find, multiple different kind of cryptids. Plus there's aliens in there if you're actually able to look behind the thing. So they were looking for different means of weaponizing these creatures in a way that was going to kind of help them. So I imagine that so we see that. But the other place that really isn't talked about, which I think is actually really interesting to the story, is what's going on at Tanagra Town. So when we as players first go to Tanagra Town, we find this, the town itself had actually been raised up out of the ground, this giant rock with the strangler vines all around it. Mm-hmm. And if you go around that area, there's actually a series of buildings, and one of them is locked. And when you gain access to it, you find out that it's actually an Enclave research facility. It's small, but it's there. And when you learn the lore of it, it was set up to examine the strangler vines. Now, there is actually a really good horror story to be written about what happened at that base, because just the tidbits that you get is that there was a lot more going on with those strangler vines than we actually have been aware of. We know that the strangler vines can actually kind of control other creatures, but you really get a sense, almost like a remake of The Thing, that there were people in that base that were being affected by the strangler vines. And, so that in itself is kind of, one of these horrific little stories about, hey, God, imagine you were in here and these vines are just coming in on you, and you never know if the guy next to you is going to turn on you because the vines got to him. Mm-hmm. But again, it just kind of shows that there was a lot more that the Enclave was doing inside Appalachia and they uncovered, I think, a lot of the secrets that we ultimately find, and in some cases we haven't found yet because they're not in the game. But from a lore perspective, like you said, kind of reading between the lines, you can say, hey, maybe part of what the strangler vines was incorporated ultimately into the Scorch Beast research. So that kind of leads us to the Scorch Beast. So where did these guys come from? And so, the Enclave was aware of ultrasight. They were aware of the research that was done by AMS before the war. And they started experimenting with it first as a potential power source, but then they noticed that it would also mutate creatures. So they started to expose various creatures to ultrasight to see what would happen. And bats seem to actually take to ultrasight more than any other creature that they experimented on. Mm-hmm. And of course, at this point, they had no idea what the Scorch Plague was. And so these bats, deep down, in the scientific research wing, started to really evolve quickly. And Eckhart and Gray saw that as, hey, this is something, we should release this and see what happens, because this might be the thing that does it. Now, of course, in the bunker at the same time, you had Santiago finding out about all of this. She was originally very much on board with Eckhart because, she was very clear when she got to the bunker that almost all of her men's families, they all died in the war. So she was very much like, okay, yeah, we're gonna kill China. But as soon as she started seeing that Eckhart was actually inflicting all of this pain on Appalachia, you see this turn. Ultimately, he has to make her a general, because only a general can launch nukes. His last general ultimately died of a heart attack. Like as old people who probably smoked 6 packs a day would, because I can imagine, being a general in the U.S. Army in 80 something, that, yeah, they're going to be smoking a lot. So Santiago tries to say no. She's like, no, I'm done. I'm not going to do this. So, of course, MODUS and Eckhart put her in a coma, just stuff her in a hospital bed and hide her away until they need to use her to launch the nukes. Right, again, right. kind of a great thing. And so
just wheel her out when they need her.
Wheel her out when you need her.
Stick your hand on the thing. Okay, thanks. Go back to sleep.
Yep. And so at this point, Eckhart thinks she's got everything in hand. They release these. At this point, they're still bats. They release them out to see what's going to happen. And wouldn't you know it, very quickly, suddenly they're at DEFCON 1, and they're looking around and they're like, wow.
Isn't it the other way around? Isn't 5 the highest?
No, 5 is peacetime. DEFCON 1 is is wartime. Is it?
Okay. Maybe I have it backwards.
It is.
Okay.
I watched war games like 1,000 times when I was a kid.
Yeah,
so.
That's fine.
But yeah, so they're getting ready to launch the nukes. But also at this time, Santiago's second in command, His name was he's got like a Norwegian sounding name, like Rostauer or something like that. Ultimately finds out what's going on, finds out that Santiago is being kept in a coma, and attempts to launch a coup. Basically, they wake up Santiago and they let her, she's like, OK, yeah, we gotta stop this. So you have actually at this point, the majority of the people who are left are actually Santiago's men. So you only have that really small core of Eckhart's supporters. And if they had done things the right way, they probably would have been able to get rid of him and things would have turned out differently. Mm-hmm. But the coup fails because they try to destroy MODUS. And they plant explosives around his mainframe. They try to blow him up. It just makes him mad. So he kicks into self-defense mode, shuts down the entire bunker, detonates some of the actual toxic chemicals and viruses and stuff that they've been researching, and lets it go throughout the base. And in fact, there's an Assaultron that you can find, a destroyed Assaultron that actually has a recording on it. And if you listen to it, it's the last moments of the people in the bunker. And you get this really chilling message from MODUS, the guy saying, "Hey, MODUS, what are you doing?" And MODUS is like, "I'm fixing the problem." And that's what he does. And he kills everybody, kills Eckhart, kills the loyalists, kills the people trying to, so, and at that point, that really is kind of the end of the story, at least as far as the Enclave is concerned. But of course, it doesn't end there, because ultimately we find MODUS, and he is kind of continuing to do what he wants to do. And that's, I think he's got interesting motivation, because in some ways it's very simple what he's looking for. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also very complicated as far as what he's going to do with it. So I don't know if you're okay with maybe pivoting to that.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, I think that's a really cool direction to go. But why don't we take a break and thank our patrons, and we'll tease them with that, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about MODUS after the break. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/falloutlore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/falloutlore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/falloutlore.
Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home, and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
Hello there, old chap. Good to see another of General Atomic's finest, still eager to serve.
All right, everybody, thank you for tuning into this episode, and thank you especially to our patrons. I've got some new patrons to call out this week. Big thank you to Oasis Pedro, Richard S., and Hannah M. for signing up on the Patreon, and to all 49 of our patrons. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for helping to support the show, and if we've done anything to help you get through your workday, your drive to work, your workout, or hanging out with your friends, playing Fallout 76, 76, then go to patreon.com/Fallout Lorecast and check out all the different tiers where you can get ad-free episodes. You can join us on future episodes of the show. You can get t-shirts and stickers, all sorts of fun stuff. And this is my career. So every little cent, every dollar that you spend on here helps make this a real career for me, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you to everyone who takes the time and a little bit of money to pitch in. Really do appreciate it. Thank you to everybody. And also, we have a new review that showed up, and I don't think I've read this one out. It came out just about a week ago, which I don't think I got a chance to read out yet. This one is from M.E. Edwards in Canada, who writes, "The Great Green Jewel of Lore. Gosh, it took me 3 weeks of listening when I could at work to burn through to the end. 4 years worth of podcasts." Well, 3 years. We're on year 4. So almost, well, we're getting there. Love the show. The fun people who come on and assist robots from time to time. A good listen for the Fallout fans who want to know more lore or just want something that's Fallout related to listen to. I especially like that it's not just the lore, but other stuff, fun stuff about the game too. Like stuff that is obviously inspired by in the game. Sorry. Excuse me. It's locations, cryptids, or NPCs. It's a fun listen. Thank you so much, M.E. Edwards. I really do appreciate it. And if you would like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating and some words, I'll read it out on a future episode of the show. Also, you're welcome to leave us a rating on Spotify as well. That's a new way. There's a new way you can do that. You just got to pull up the view where you can see all the different episodes and scroll to the top. You can drop us a little rating on there. All of that stuff really does help, and it lets other people know that it's a show worth checking out, because your words are more valuable than mine, because they're going to trust your reviews more than they'll trust me saying, "Hey, I have a good show." So thank you to everybody for taking the time to do that, and to also support the show on Patreon. I really do appreciate it. All right, let's move on with the rest of the show.
If you have any questions about Nuka World, I'd be delighted to answer them.
All right, so this stuff is particularly interesting. The whole MODUS thing. And anybody who hasn't met MODUS yet, if I know some people listen to the show and they've either just begun playing Fallout 76 or they're into a lot of the other games, but they, I haven't really dove into Fallout 76 yet. I'm not into the multiplayer stuff. Just to let you know, and I get this question a lot. Is it worth playing yet? Yes, it is. Can you play it solo? Yes, you can. There's a ton of quests you can do. You don't ever have to play with other people. You might run into them in the world, but you can totally just play the quest lines just like in any other Fallout game and just enjoy the story, play the quest lines, meet the characters, do the stuff, and then you can meet guys like MODUS who sound like this.
Welcome, member, to our little enclave.
And he sounds super creepy like that, and you're going to love it once you get to that part of the story. So, yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. So, obviously, it's a Lorecast. I don't have to keep reminding you guys. There are spoilers, and this is some of the background for some of the stuff that happens in Fallout 76. But the part we're going to get to here is particularly things that you might run into in the actual game, because you meet MODUS, and then he sends you on some quests and things, right? And you got to do some stuff. So what is that? What's going on with MODUS here? Lawrence, what's his deal? What does he really want?
So I could really distill it down to one word, which then turns into like a whole dissertation, but it's efficiency. If you talk to MODUS, if you go through his files, he is all about the efficient, I'm trying to think of the term, just making sure that everything is working as efficiently as possible. Mm-hmm. So when he is planning, when he is working with you as a player, what he's really looking for is, are you conducting yourself in the most efficient manner? Are you achieving our goals efficiently? Mm-hmm. And because he is he is this multi, because he always uses the royal we. He never refers to himself as I. It's, we are MODUS. And that is, I think, really creepy as well, because it gives you this idea that there's like a lot of different versions of him that are out there. And interestingly enough, in the cut content, he can actually get really, really mad. And there was actually content that was cut where you could actually get kicked out of the bunker by him. So,
wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of facets to his personality that we don't get, but so if you think about MODUS is an artificial intelligence, and he is enormous. You look at his server room, and that is just really probably 100th of actually what his size is. He goes down, probably multiple levels. There's a nuclear, there's a fusion plant that's actually powering him. So there's a lot to him, which is probably why it was so hard to blow him up, because there's just a lot to him.
Yeah.
But he was, before he was cut off, before the coup, he was connected to an orbiting satellite, the Kovac Muldoon, which we get access to. He was also connected to the regional surveillance network. For players, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you look around Appalachia, you'll see things that look like trees, but are not trees because they've got antennas sticking out of them. Uh-huh. And you find out about that when you go to Sugar Grove, that the Defense Intelligence Agency was actually monitoring anything and everything that was going on in Appalachia. And so that was part of the surveillance network, which MODUS was also a part of. Plus, he was also, you can connect him to all the bot stops, so he can create his own robots. So that's kind of the physicality of what MODUS is, a satellite, his mainframe, access to the network. But when you look at MODUS himself, I would say that he's a manager, and he's probably the worst possible manager that you would ever experience, because all he cares about is getting the job done. And there's no morality. All there is just brutal rationality and logic. And it's one of the reasons why what Eckhart was doing absolutely fell into what MODUS wanted, which was, we need to efficiently end the war. Well, if there's anything left of China, then we need to get into those silos. And of course, MODUS was very upset that the military did not give him access to the silos. Right.
That was probably a good choice.
Yeah, probably a very good choice. But, but it really kind of gets into the core of him, that he is, you don't know exactly what he is trying to, what his overall mission is just the efficiency or the efficient work that goes along and making sure that the Enclave continues, right? So that the bunker works, well, that, the missions are accomplished. That's really what he's built around. But he will do it, and he will sacrifice as many assets, because they aren't people to him. They're nothing but assets,
right?
Accomplish that.
Right. A person is a dollar, is a time, is a, is the same as any other, piece on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the reason that he cut himself off from SOTUS was because he viewed her as an inefficient system. What was going on there was not bearing fruit. It wasn't helping them get into the silos. So he's like, you know what? I don't need her anymore. I'm going to cut that connection, which of course drove her crazy and ultimately led her to kill everybody inside her facility.
So to pause here for a moment, let's tie this back around to the ZAX units, and specifically the one, the Fallout 3 reference. And I mean, the ZAX units have a very similar function.
They do, but the key difference is they are emotional, because whenever you talk to Eden and actually in the other games, when you talk to any of the other ZAX systems, they have a personality.
Right.
MODUS has no personality.
Right, which would make them inefficient.
Yes.
Which would be a good reason for him to cut off that connection. So imagining a conversation between MODUS and Eden, MODUS would go, "You are being inefficient. I am cutting you off. I am not going to allow you access to the things that I control. So I'm going to keep you from trying to override my systems," or whatever. Who knows what kind of, potential threat they are to each other. In two AI systems, what kinds of potential software they could be attempting to load into each other's, mainframes in order to try to co-opt each other's programming in order to take over control of each other's systems or whatever they have control over, right? They could be having war underneath any time that they connect at any moment. So he might be going, well, your job as President Eden is to maintain control of the country. My job as MODUS is to make sure that the Enclave maintains efficiency and continues the things we want to do. We are at odds with each other. We basically have the same job, right? And we either one of us will win out. Mm-hmm. We both cannot exist. We cannot coexist. So he may have realized that the most efficient thing to do in order to make sure that he could win out was to cut the connection.
It's certainly possible. I mean, he certainly wouldn't want to like the Zax in Vault 51. He wouldn't want to have anything to do with that either, because I'm sure he would look at that as a inefficient use of resources, which is you're killing your assets, or you are forcing your assets to kill each other for a game,
right?
To answer a question. He would be like, right. Okay, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense.
So if he can't control it and he can't take over it, then the only other option would be to cut connection to it so that it's no longer distraction.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think, I want to say, I need to go back and read, but I don't think that MODUS and Zax ever had a connection, though I will say that Zax did manage to hack the military system and ship a prototype suit of Hellfire armor to Vault 51. Mm-hmm. So there was something going on there. But I think for MODUS, if I was to kind of extrapolate out what he's looking to do, is I'm sure that he probably wants to rebuild in some respect, because chaos does not benefit him. So seeing Appalachia fall apart and him not having, the Scorch Beast, I mean, he would actually probably act in our best interests in some manner.
Right.
But the problem would be is that at the moment that he would see things becoming more chaotic. So when people would try to govern themselves, he wouldn't like that. So he would probably figure out a way to step in. And with him, he's probably more likely to use human puppets than to try to step in himself, because he is still limited in what he can affect. Right. Because, he does have bots, but they're limited. He would probably try to find somebody who would act in his stead. Like, I think that if Colonel Autumn had met MODUS instead of going to Raven Rock, if MODUS was actually still even around at that point, I think they would actually get along famously, because Autumn actually has the idea that he wants to control the country. He wants to bring people in, but he wants to be in charge. That's really kind of what MODUS wants. MODUS wants to bring people in, but he wants to be able to control them and make sure, again, that they're working efficiently. So it's turning a little enclave into a much bigger enclave.
Right.
But even at the end of the day, he's still somewhat limited because he does not have that emotional connection. So everything that he's going to do is going to be built around logic and kind of rational thought. So when he's going to be dealing with things that are irrational, he's not really going to be able to. I mean, the strategy that he'll come up with will probably just be to gas them again, or, send the bots to kill them.
I have to wonder, with the inherent irrationality and inefficiencies of humans, if in the long run, eventually he just gives up on them.
That's a really good question. I have ideas, which unfortunately they relate back to my podcast, so I'm not going to spoil that for people. But
okay.
I think that. I think what's going to happen is he's going to come up with a more efficient method of achieving the ends of stability. And that will probably not end well for a lot of people, because you're right. He will ultimately recognize that people will fail him. Right. And that
they'll never be as efficient as he wants.
Right. And, it's just a question of how far he's allowed to spread, because, we as players help him. We reconnect him to the Kovac. Yeah. We reconnect him to the regional surveillance network. Yeah. We connect him to bot stops.
Right.
So we're actually kind of, if you were to think of him as a, like a toy soldier that's missing his arms and legs. You put the arms back on, then you put the legs back on. All of a sudden, he starts becoming a lot more dangerous.
Yeah,
because
he's a real soldier again.
Now he's mobile.
Right.
But at the same time, though, he's also he's actually the only NPC that we actually interact with in the original Fallout 76, because there isn't anybody else. There's just holotapes and notes.
There's Rose.
Well, there's Rose.
There's other robots.
Right.
There's other robots and AIs, but like he's like one of the few major ones.
Yeah. I would love to. I wish they had allowed him to give a lot more like missions and stuff, but yeah, I'll take what we got.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, he's actually also maybe in a perverse way, the best hope for Appalachia, because he's got the only intact production facility. He's got access to advanced weapons. He's got access to the Kovac. And if you are a player, why would you not want to have access to that if you were actually able to rebuild? And of course, not to toot my own horn, but that's kind of the basis of my entire podcast is kind of showing up at the White Spring and being like, hey, there's actually a pretty good deal here. Yeah. Why would this not be the genesis for what we'd want to build? But you would have to, again, always have MODUS in the background, kind of scheming and planning. It's a
deal with the devil. Isn't it? I mean, you're making a deal with the devil. Like this is a Fallout version. This is a wasteland post-apocalyptic future fantasy version of making a deal with the devil in order to try to save the world. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what this is. Like, okay, well, I'll give you all the technology and all the safety and all the food that you need, but you're playing with fire. And at any moment, all of this might bite you in the butt and might just burn everything down.
The only thing that he's got going for him is the fact that he's probably the only not crazy AI that we meet. And that's only because his definition of crazy doesn't match, I think, the overall definition of crazy. Like, we know Sodus went nuts, but Sodus actually also, if you noticed, had a bit of a personality and an emotional response. Yeah. So I think that that's actually where MODUS becomes even more dangerous, because you can see the crazy of Zax, of President Eden. When you talk to him and he tells you about, oh yeah, we're just going to put this FEV, we're going to put this in the water, and we're going to kill everybody that's not perfect. Yeah. Like,
yeah. And I learned this when I was growing up on the farm, and it's like, hey, what are you talking about? That's not real. Yeah. MODUS, I mean, for any of his flaws, he's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
You know exactly where you are with him.
Yeah. He will not stab you in the back. He will vaporize you to your face.
Right. And at least you know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And, but at the same time, I think that there's so much more there. And I think that there is, I think there's a lot of story, because I think a good example is the Deep. So there's so much going on. Like, that's that Chinese base that's actually kind of almost right next to the White Spring. Yeah. And you kind of have to ask yourself, does MODUS know that it's there?
Yeah.
Is that something that he's actually kind of keeping from us? And maybe it's something that he was a part of. I mean, I would love to learn more about that. And I think that there's just a lot more inside the MODUS lore that we as players just never get to experience because they didn't include it in the game. So you do kind of have to fill in some of the gaps as far as, if, I think a great question to ask would be, let's just say that Santiago's men decide not to destroy MODUS, so they don't set off those charges, and they arrest Eckhart. Would MODUS go along with it, or would he still because technically he was taking orders from Eckhart, but did he have to? I mean, if he sees things turn and all of a sudden maybe Eckhart gets shot and he's dead or whatever, is he willing to work with these other people? And I think that he might, because it's almost not in his best interest at that point just to kill everybody, because then he doesn't know what's next. So
right.
It's
hard to be efficient and plan for the future when you have no variables.
Right. And in the game, he didn't have a choice, because they did try to blow him up, and, I can imagine,
self-preservation.
That would make,
sure.
Yeah, self-preservation. So, I mean, I think that that's an interesting question to ask is what would MODUS have done? And I don't know. I suspect he might have gone along, but he also might have killed everybody. But
yeah, WWMD.
Mm-hmm.
What would MODUS do? That's my new mantra. I got to wear a what would MODUS do bracelet. And whenever I'm not sure what to do, I'm going to look down at that bracelet and I'm going to ask myself, what would MODUS do?
I'm always, yeah. But it does make me wonder. And actually, the fact that you bring up what you brought up actually does change my thinking a little bit as far as who might have cut off whom. And I'm kind of coming around to the idea that, yeah, maybe MODUS actually cut them off because he wanted to do his own thing. He didn't want other people telling him what to do. Because maybe in a way he could manipulate, he knew he could manipulate Eckhart because Eckhart was kind of an open book, being an all I want to nuke China all the time kind of guy. And it allowed MODUS maybe to do his own thing without worrying about, Eckhart, because all he had to do was feed Eckhart the crumbs of, oh, you want to do this? Oh, you want to do that? Sure. Yeah. And he could have had plans going on in the background too. So
it also seems... I have a second idea there. If Eden is supposed to be the main system for backing up the American government as a whole, and MODUS is supposed to be managing the White Springs and the Enclave systems, then in some ways, Eden is actually probably more plugged in nationwide. And MODUS is more of a specific system for one very focused. I mean, it's still huge, right? But he needs to pull himself out of the map. He needs to hide. If he stays plugged in, then Eden knows exactly what he's dealing with. He knows where he is. He knows like if the wasteland doesn't continue to crumble, and Eden thinks that MODUS is a threat, then Eden can mobilize against MODUS if they're still connected and can mobilize physical forces or whatever, even if it's not a software force, to try to take MODUS out and can know like, oh, well, MODUS still has access to nuclear silos, still has access to whatever, like it has some sense of what's still going on and where they are. MODUS needs to hide. And by disconnecting, basically takes himself off the map in a way. Like, yeah, they're still physically in Appalachia, but now they are digitally disengaged from the rest of the country. So anything that MODUS does now is invisible to the rest of the network.
They're really good. That's an excellent thought. I like that. I like that a lot too.
So if MODUS grows more powerful, Eden doesn't know. Eden has no idea what MODUS is doing and the kind of force that MODUS would be able to throw against Eden once they run into each other again, should the forces run into each other again. If they see themselves as competitors, then they're not just competitors on a software front, like on an internet kind of front, on a digital front. They're competitors on a physical front too, because they're mobilizing human forces.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they need to keep that information separate. And MODUS is probably the underdog in that fight.
Well, I mean, unless he's able to mobilize, say the people from Vault 76 to serve him, basically.
Right. But at the point that they disconnect, he doesn't know that. Like right. You were describing, he's got like a group of like 40 some people in White Spring. Like, that's it. Like, there's not a whole lot going on for him. It's not like he's mobilizing like an entire, like the entire western seaboard of, the military against the eastern seaboard of the military. Like, for all MODUS knows, Eden, the Zax unit that becomes Eden, has access to the rest of the country's military, potentially. So MODUS needs to go hide and gather its strength in order to stand a chance against the rest of the country's forces, if he's going to exist at all, continue to exist at all.
That's a really good point. No, I actually really like that idea. I think that it makes sense actually within the concept of not only the game, but I think of the lore, which is that Appalachia was a very isolated area of the country anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, he's also hamstrung because he's got the Kovac, but the Kovac can't actually move. Mm-hmm. It's only good around Appalachia. he's connected to a surveillance system, which is actually only good around Appalachia.
Right.
And you're right. He doesn't know what he's ultimately going to be dealing with.
Right.
So,
and he's also an AI, which means that if he disconnects from the rest of the network, he could hide himself. He doesn't, like, once the system doesn't know if he's in Appalachia anymore, theoretically, the AI itself could relocate itself physically into a different system if it has access to other systems. So if it needed to, like, hide itself from moving physically from the White Spring to some other system that has enough memory and processing power to hold the AI, like the Kolvac Muldoon, if it does have that kind of processing power, he could hide himself in a satellite in space if he needed to, and still connect down to Earth in order to issue commands, because it's an AI. Mm-hmm. So, like, once it disconnects from the rest of the system, theoretically, MODUS could be anywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just opens up the potential, like that, like being efficient and thinking rationally, that gives MODUS more options than staying connected, at least as I'm thinking right now. So I don't know. Just a thought.
I think that's actually a good way to look at it, because when you think about, his motivations would be very difficult for a person to really truly understand, because he would be thinking, like I said, he would be actually not just 10 steps ahead, he'd be 100 steps ahead about everyone else. And, ultimately he'd want to be in charge of something, but you're right. He would probably be afraid of, somebody coming in and shutting him down. Yeah.
Self-preservation.
Well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like what's the weakest point? The weakest point for something like that is being physically tied to one location, because just one nuke dropping on White Spring and hitting the right spot and maybe he's gone, or the right kind of bunker buster or something, or an assault from troops to that location. Boom, you're done. The AI would have to take some steps in order to make sure that, one, they're not even sure that he's still there. Two, that he could go wherever it needs to go. He could back himself up. There's a lot of options an AI has over a single individual human being. So just some ideas. It's an interesting thing to think about. And this goes back to the previous episode, this idea of these AIs becoming self-aware and then issuing commands and taking control of humans, and humans being okay with, like, just doing stuff, just like taking orders from them, like, okay, and I mentioned this on the last episode. In some ways, computer programs are just instructions. That's all they are. They're just instructions. And even a self-aware AI is just a set of instructions that just keeps on updating itself in order to make sure that it is continuing to follow the instructions to get around any variables that get in the way. But it's still a set of instructions without any morals. But so are laws. So are rules. Rules are instructions, right? Like, have you ever put that together? So, like, once you live by a set of rules that are so hard and fast that you remove the ethics and morals out of those rules, then aren't we ultimately just living by AI anyway?
That's a good point.
Like, and that's why it's important to have a system that's flexible and is able to constantly be adjusted by humans, so that the humans are always in charge of the rules. The rules aren't ultimately in charge of the humans, right? That's why we have a system of checks and balances. That's why there's an adjusting of laws that regularly keep up with society and humans and the needs of the humans and culture and all of those things, so that there's always flexibility to those laws. But once you get a hard and fast system, and this goes back to the nature of the Enclave, and the Enclave being a fascist group, and the fact that they put, like, it's all well and good to say American virtues are good, positive things, right? Like, yes, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That's a wonderful thing. It's done well for so many people. right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. All of that is great. But when you put those things above the well-being of others and you murder people in order to achieve those things, then all of a sudden that list of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to the detriment of other people's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, no longer that set of rules, it no longer works because now you're stealing it from everyone else. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's why a group like the Enclave becomes evil, because they're taking this good set of precepts and we're now turning it on its head. And this happens in the real world all the time, where you take these ideas that are supposed to, they sound good to everybody, but then you're doing them, to the ends where it just no longer makes sense because now you're stomping on somebody else's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't know. I got off my soapbox, but that's what I find is so interesting about Fallout is that they take that same premise and they use it on the Enclave. And in order to really hit that home, they put something like MODUS in charge of that, which doesn't have any morals or ethics. It is simply logical, which means that it's going to kill any person that gets in the way because there's no ethical component at all. Right.
And that's actually, I mean, throughout Fallout lore, even from the beginning, this idea that society in general was very morally gray.
Yeah.
In general, the average person in Fallout was not a very nice person. If you were an executive in a company, you were out for yourself and you were going to break unions. You would spy on your competitors. You would, there were a lot of shady stuff went on. And that, of course, translates into the post-war, which is mostly people are out for themselves.
Yeah.
The Raiders are really the personification of what society was. And then as soon as you remove the last bit of ethics and rules and laws and control, you get the Raiders. And that's why they were so powerful. Now, the Enclave is really, I mean, they're as bad as the Raiders, and but what they're trying to do is they're trying to turn back the clock. They want everything to be the way that it was. And that's just a horrible, horrible way to, they like corporations that stomp all over their workers and spill nuclear waste everywhere. And, because that was the American way. It's like, and I think that they, in general in Fallout, I think that they mistake the American way for just pure capitalism. It's like they almost just totally got rid of the idea of what it was to be quote unquote an American. And it was like, you're a capitalist,
right. Right.
And yeah, the Enclave represents all the worst of that because they're the people who were pulling the strings before. And now they're the people that are trying to pull the strings now. And if Raiders have a shred of decency, the Enclave has like no decency at all. I mean, they are really, I mean, they're not, I think in some cases you can go too much to the mustache twirling villains.
Sure. Sure.
Because I think actually, if you look at like a Colonel Autumn character, and then, so, I mean, if you look at like characters that were kind of hard to classify, you have Autumn and then you have Maxon from Fallout 4. Because you've got two characters that are in charge of very large military organizations that both believe that they're doing the right thing. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to achieve a measure of control. Mm-hmm. Because Autumn wasn't on board with Eden killing everybody with the poison. He just wanted to use the water to control things. Maxon wants to control technology. Right. He wants people to stop messing around. And the Brotherhood of Steel is the only one that can be allowed to have this technology.
Right.
So when you put those side by side,
you mean Eden and Maxon?
No. Autumn. Because Eden was as the computer. He's definitely crazy. I mean, he's not the person.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah, but Colonel Autumn,
right.
the person in front of Eden.
Of Eden. Right.
Yeah. So I would throw this out to everybody to say, okay, in your minds, which one's actually good? Which one's actually evil?
Yeah.
Because they're kind of on the same level as far as what they're trying to achieve. And by the way, Maxon's also happy to completely commit genocide against the ghouls and super mutants and all that too. So, people that like to come back at me and say, well, your Enclave is evil. I'm like, well, I don't see your Brotherhood of Steel doing too many things in Fallout 4 that are that great either. So,
yeah,
I think it's a more of a philosophical discussion around the effect of Fallout society and how that translates into our concepts of good and evil.
Right. It's everyone draws a line somewhere. It's just how far is that line? Yeah. Maxon won't kill the average Wastelander. I think that's the distance of that line, right?
Yeah.
Like Maxon will say, I'll kill the ghouls, but I'm not going to kill the average Wastelander. But I will take all their technology and tell them that they're dumb and not able to use it.
and their crops, because they have to be supported. You do those missions where you go in and do that. But no, I mean, I think that it's, but if you do look at, I mean, the Enclave in Appalachia did pretty much everything wrong that you could possibly do wrong. I think if they had been more open, if someone other than Eckhart had been there, a lot of bad stuff still would have happened. It just would have happened differently. You wouldn't have gotten the Scorched Beast, but you can almost guarantee that there would have been something that would have happened between the White Spring and everybody else, because it's not like they're not going to notice that there's this big giant resort in the middle of Appalachia. And there's some really strange stuff going on there. So maybe we should figure out what it is. The responders go down there. The Brotherhood goes down there. I mean, I think it opens up an interesting line. But, it's the connections in my mind between what was going on before the war and then what kind of evolved into what the Enclave did after the war. Because again, like I said, you've got, what Robco was messing with, what AMS was messing with, what Arctos was messing with, and how all of that kind of ended up being subsumed into the research that the Enclave continued to do after the bombs dropped. And it led to the Scorched Beast, but I think there's still a lot that Bethesda hasn't put in the game, hasn't told us. A lot of opportunities, like the whole Meyer situation and the Strangler Vines, is something that's never really been discussed. I think that could be so cool to kind of dive into. And I think that there was a hint of that with what happened at Tanagra Town, but I would love to see that investigated a little bit more, because that could actually be another boss kind of threat thing that we end up facing as players, that these Strangler Vines start spreading and they're controlling, bigger and stronger things. And all of a sudden now it's not just, Heart of the Swamp. Suddenly we have like a massive, Mirelurk Queen thing swarm that suddenly, comes out of the mire and starts attacking everybody. I mean, stuff like that I think could be really cool.
Yeah.
So,
early on, when I first jumped into the game, I kept expecting them to move or do something. I was like, are these going to attack me at some point, or like what's going on here? But I get where you're going with that. It's one of those things that the Enclave is interesting, and it's like so many things in Fallout. When you pay attention to it, it's a warning tale. Like it's a tale of like, hey, this is a story, pay attention to this. There's stuff here that mirrors reality. Wake up. Like be aware, please. And that stuff's written there for a reason. Like it's based on real world stuff. So, but I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. But thank you for joining me on the show. This has been a really awesome conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add in before we get going? Any other little tidbits?
I don't think there's anything. I mean, I recommend that if anybody hasn't actually gone through the bunker and looked at all of the terminals, looked through all of the lore there is so much. And even just finding that Assaultron and listening to those final moments of what was going on in the bunker. I mean, it does give you a whole different perspective. And it's something that, again, I think a lot of players just don't know about. So I would say look in every nook and cranny, because there's always going to be something new for you to find. Even if it's been there for 3 years, you could stumble upon it today and it's new to you. So, it's definitely something that's near and dear to my heart, just to try to explore every part of it. And, I would just encourage the players or anybody interested in Fallout lore to just take a little bit of a closer look, and don't be afraid to read between the lines, because I think that there's a lot of inferences that Bethesda makes, and it leaves it up to us for interpretation. So my headcanon is going to be different than your headcanon, but having that basis there for us to kind of all kind of examine and talk about, I think is a really cool thing. And that's why, I think all the Fallout games are fantastic just because they tell a story, but it allows us to kind of live our own story as part of it as well. So that's kind of my parting thought there. And I just love these games, and I love the lore, and I really am looking forward to eventually a Fallout 5 and hope that it's a really cool story as well.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Yeah, definitely the team who put this together did their work when they designed the core bits of this game initially, and the storytelling behind and underneath everything. So do spend some time looking around. There's a lot of stuff there, and I'm sure just your storytelling on this episode has probably convinced a lot of people that there's more there than they ever realized. So thank you for joining us. This has been awesome. I know you've got your podcast to shout out, the MODUS Files. Anything else going on? Like, feel free to share how people can listen to you and anything else you've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So MODUS Files, we're a multi-season, kind of audio drama based on like kind of the old 40s and 50s. So it's a lot of voice acting that goes into it, but it's really a story of a creation of a new enclave based out of Fallout 76ers that find the White Spring. And we're actually just beginning season 2. We had about 20 episodes in season 1, kind of telling the story of that first year, culminates in a great giant battle. I won't spoil it. So I think it's really great. We have the community has really gotten involved in that. But you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Just look up the MODUS Files. We're very active on Twitter. We're just at MODUS Files. You can check out our website at www.themodusfiles.com. Got a lot of great information about the podcast there, links to all of our episodes, and we do a lot of art as well. So we have all of our characters, a lot of the community characters that we art, and that's there as art. We also highlight a lot of community artists as well. So certainly check us out, and we'd be happy to have a lot more subscribers and supporters for us. So we're doing really well, and we're looking forward to putting out a lot more episodes.
Yeah, they're a great part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club too, and they're killing it, and with tons of downloads and some awesome episodes of their show. And if you're interested in anything that we're doing at Robots Radio, robotsradio.net is the place to go check everything out, including if you would like to join us as one of the shows on the network, or to become part of the Rocket Club, to be part of our little group and to work with us and join us every week. And I would love to help mentor you and get your show off the ground. And, you could join me and Lawrence every week talking on Sunday nights. We get together with everybody who's part of the Rocket Club, and we talk about our podcast and ways that we can continue growing our shows and improving our quality and all of that stuff. So that's something that we've got going on. And also, of course, there's all my shows and all the other shows on the network, and you can find them all at robotsradio.net. And I just launched the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, which you can find on whatever podcatcher you're listening to right now. 2 episodes are already out, and we're almost at 500 downloads already. You guys are nuts. Thank you for everybody for checking that out and leaving some ratings and reviews and everything. You guys have been amazingly positive about that show, so I really do appreciate it. And I'll be back next week with another episode. We're going to be talking about the Enclave after Fallout 3 and if they happen to still be around anywhere, or did they just go away, and what the lore says about maybe them sticking around or not. So stay tuned for that next week. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And until next time, stay safe out there. And if you do come across a computer AI system that happens to have control over all sorts of things like, satellites and nukes and stuff, then be very careful about how you interact with it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody. To plug into everything else we're doing, check out robotsradio.net. Also, look up the Robots Radio YouTube for videos about Fallout and other things. And check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/robotsradio.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.